Welcome to Days of Roar, the Detroit Tiger podcast, brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. My name is Mark Gorash. I am here with Free Press beat writer Evan Petzold. Ev, how was your week? What are we going to talk about today?
Yeah, we have some great guests on this week's episode. Houston Astros beat writer Chandler Rome and Detroit Tigers pitcher Jackson Jobe. But before we get into baseball, my week has been pretty good. I went up north with my family over the weekend. It was more for family time, but also to celebrate my parents' birthdays and my brother's birthday. My parents have January birthdays, and my brother turns 21 coming up here in early February. So we all had a good time up north. We went cross-country skiing, did some ice skating, played a lot of euchre. It's always a good time when you go up to Houghton Lake with the family. As for the Tigers, there were reports, first mentioned in The Athletic, about the Tigers and Chicago Cubs trying to trade for Houston Astros right-handed reliever Ryan Presley. The Astros were trying to trade Presley, who's owed $14 million in 2025 in the final year of his contract, maybe because they want to clear some payroll space, but also maybe because they want to sign Alex Bregman. They want to bring him back. On Friday night, I heard the Tigers were not going to trade for Presley. Yes, the Tigers want to add a reliever with closer experience. Yes, Ryan Presley would have fit. Yes, the Tigers looked into trading for Presley, but I don't think the Tigers got off first base with the Astros in those negotiations. As of Sunday evening, Presley waived his no-trade clause for a trade to the Chicago Cubs. So Presley to the Tigers was never close. And then the trade with the Cubs that had been in place since Friday, that was approved by Presley on Sunday evening, and it all went through. The Tigers still want to add a reliever with closer experience. Kenley Jansen, Kyle Finnegan, and David Robertson are names to watch here on the free agent market. But Mark, the biggest news of the week was the fact that Tigers free agent target Alex Bregman could re-sign with the Houston Astros. That door was closed and locked not too long ago. And now the door is cracked open, and it might be swinging even a little bit further open as we get closer to spring training, because Bregman remains unsigned with 22 days until position players report to spring training. The slow-moving Bregman market has allowed the Astros to jump right back into the mix.
All right, let's go to question one of the big two. What is the latest on Alex Bregman?
There are 5 teams in the mix for Alex Bregman: the Detroit Tigers, Houston Astros, Boston Red Sox, Chicago Cubs, and Toronto Blue Jays. The Astros, also known as Bregman's team for his entire professional baseball career, including 9 MLB seasons, jumped back into the mix over the weekend, re-engaging in negotiations with Bregman and agent Scott Boras. Here's a refresher on the past. The Astros offered 6 years, $156 million to Bregman at the beginning of the offseason. Bregman turned that offer down, seeking 7 years, $200 million. Talks with the Astros, they reached a standstill, so the Astros pivoted away from Bregman in late December. They traded for Isak Paredes to play third base, and they signed Christian Walker to play first base. 1 month later, it's late January, and a lot has changed because nothing has changed. Bregman remains unsigned. He isn't getting the $200 million he wanted, so the Astros are now back in the hunt for Bregman. And if the Astros sign Bregman, then Bregman would play third base, Isak Paredes would play second base, and Jose Altuve would play left field. And here's the biggest note. The 6-year, $156 million offer from the Astros, it remains on the table. So the Tigers have to exceed that offer, and probably exceed that offer significantly, to pry Bregman away from his home in Houston and convince him to spend what could be the rest of his career in Detroit. To help us understand the Alex Bregman situation, especially as it pertains to the Houston Astros, we're joined by Chandler Rome, the Astros beat writer for The Athletic and co-host of the Crush City Territory podcast. Chandler, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, what's up, guys? Thanks for having me.
For sure. So, hey, the big news is how did the Astros get back in the mix for Alex Bregman? And what can you tell us about the current state of negotiations between Bregman and the Astros? Because this has really come out of nowhere, it seems.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's fair to call it negotiations just yet. From what I understand, their 6-year, $156 million offer from November is still on the table. What I'm unclear about is whether the Astros have flexibility to change that. Like if the negotiations pick up and the Boras Core asks for another year or more money, I'm still unclear on that. My understanding at the beginning of this whole, in November, at the beginning of the offseason, was that That was kind of it. That was the offer, and it was going to be either take this or thanks. We'll play you a nice tribute video when you come back and put a nice little graphic on social media and everything. Honestly, like the only reason the Astros are back in this is because Bregman's still available. And I know that sounds odd, but I mean, they were, as you saw with their offseason moves, and as Dana Brown basically said yesterday at the team's fan fest, like they had just kind of presumed he'd be signed by now. Once he rejected their offer, they acquired Isaac Paredes in the Kyle Tucker trade. They signed Christian Walker. They were trying to trade for Nolan Arenado before that. They had moved on from Bregman, but the fact that he's still around, what he means to the city, what he means to the franchise, what he's meant to this golden era. Look, if this was any other player, the Astros would not be at all involved. The fact that it's Alex Bregman's a little bit different, and just what he's meant to this city and what he's done. So now the Astros are back in it. You know, Dana Brown called this a long shot on Saturday when speaking to the media. From what I've kind of gathered from people around the Astros, they kind of view it the same way. They're cautiously optimistic, but certainly not confident that this is actually going to happen. But you never know. I don't know what the other offers are out there. I don't know what he's looking at, but at this point in the offseason, it's hard for me to believe he's got something demonstrably better than 6 years and $156 million.
I think this is really important, so I'll read this excerpt from your story at The Athletic. Quote, Astros owner Jim Crane has never given a free agent deal longer than 5 years or more expensive than $95 million. Team sources had indicated that Crane is unwilling to cross the luxury tax for a second consecutive year, end quote. Help Tigers fans understand why Jim Crane hasn't been aggressive with free agent contracts, what the luxury tax means for 2025 payroll for the Astros, and why all of that matters in these Bregman sweepstakes.
Why they haven't been aggressive in free agency is because they've had this self-sustaining core. Like, they let Carlos Correa walk and Jeremy Pena emerged. They let George Springer walk and Kyle Tucker emerged from their system. They let Garrett Cole and Zach Greinke walk, and Framber Valdez and Hunter Brown and Jose Urquidy, Christian Javier, Luis Garcia all emerged from their system. They haven't had to be active in free agency. They've gotten some pre-arb extensions done, one with Alex Bregman, one with Yordan Alvarez, two with Jose Altuve. So they've had their core kind of in place, and it's been kind of self-sustaining. Their farm system has taken a pretty dramatic hit in the last couple of years. They don't have that available anymore. They just don't have that next wave coming. That's part of why they traded Kyle Tucker. They got the prospect they got in return, Cam Smith, immediately became their best prospect, and it's not even close. He was, I believe, the 8th best prospect in the Cubs system. He comes to the Astros system and is unquestionably their best prospect. As far as the luxury tax goes, it should be noted that the Astros did cross the luxury tax last season. And last season, I reported the exact same thing, that Jim Crane was unwilling to cross it because that is what he told people. That is what people inside the Astros were given their marching orders. And then they woke up one morning and decided, let's give Josh Hader $95 million. That's part of this with Jim Crane. He can make some impulsive moves. He wanted Josh Hader at the 2023 trade deadline. He came out and said that. Like, they tried to acquire Blake Snell and Josh Hader during that deadline. They pivoted to Justin Verlander when the Padres didn't make him available. So Hader was a Crane guy. Like, he wanted Josh Hader. I think this situation could be similar. I mean, they know Alex Bregman better than anyone, and Alex Bregman is the kind of guy that Jim Crane would cross the luxury tax for. He's only been willing to do it when it is a player that he feels gives their team a meaningful, demonstrative upgrade. Josh Hader is that. Alex Bregman would be that. He wouldn't cross the luxury tax for, I can't even think of any other player, any other just run-of-the-mill player. He would cross it for a superstar. He did it. He would do it for that kind of guy. And I think Alex Bregman falls into that category. So while I stand by that reporting, obviously, it's pretty obvious that, Jim Crane can have kind of change. He moves as the wind goes. He can change his mind a lot and make some impulsive decisions. And who knows, this could be one of them.
Chandler, crossing the luxury tax first threshold is one thing. Crossing the luxury tax second threshold and in the second year, whole other thing. Astros on the verge of making a deal for Ryan Presley. Obviously done maybe to posture themselves for not only for future deals if they don't get Bregman, but for Alex Bregman to hopefully not allow them to ascend to the second threshold. Talk on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean that's the feeling now, is that they're gonna, as we're framing it as if the Bregman thing is realistic, which it is, they're not going to cross that second threshold. So, but it should be noted, and I want this to be very clear, they were trading Ryan Presley no matter what. I reported in November at the GM meetings that they had made it known that they were trading. They've been aggressively trying to trade him all offseason, whether Bregman was in the fold or not. It just so happens that it's all kind of aligned. All of the stars have aligned that the Bregman stuff came out as they were finalizing the Presley deal. So they've been wanting to move Presley all winter. So this is not, I don't think the two things are necessarily as correlated as they appear on paper. But I mean, obviously now that it's here, it does help. Why they moved on from Presley. I mean, part of it is he's making $14 million. Part of it is he didn't handle the demotion to setup man last year very well. And I don't mean that as so much as him. I mean that as it was an awkward situation. He got demoted for honestly no reason, for nothing that he did wrong. He didn't pitch poorly in 2023. The Astros just wanted to build a monster back into their bullpen, so they signed Josh Hader. And it took him a while to accept and to settle into being a setup guy. So, and he was good last year. I wouldn't say he was elite. He didn't miss as many bats, but when you look at, he had terrible batted ball luck, and you look at he had a 3.10 FIP to go with a 3.6 ERA. So there was some poor luck. There was some poor batted ball luck, but you avoid poor batted ball luck by missing bats, and he didn't miss bats last year. So maybe a change of scenery will help. Maybe going back to being the closer for the Cubs will help. But I want to make that known too, that it wasn't that they didn't start shopping Ryan Presley 4 days ago when the Bregman situation became more realistic. This has been a off-season long pursuit that just so happened to end right now.
All right, so let's pivot a little bit to the single most important part of the possibility of Alex Bregman returning to the Astros. That is potential Hall of Famer, one of the greatest Astros in history, Jose Altuve, has said he's willing to move to left field. So tell us a little bit about that. And that seems like a pretty interesting move there.
Yeah, I mean, we talked to Altuve at FanFest on yesterday, and he said he's willing to do anything. And look, Altuve is not very vocal. He is not a guy that comes out and publicly demands things. Most of his quotes are pretty useless. So when he started in September to really come out forcefully and say, we need to re-sign him, kind of piqued everybody's interest. And then with this, it's just taking it to another level. And it should be noted that Altuve did say that, he hasn't been approached by the team about changing positions. He hasn't brought that up, but he said, if that's what he needs to do, he'll do it. And I know you guys didn't watch a ton of Jose Altuve this year or the last couple of years, but his defensive metrics at second have fallen off of a cliff. It's between him and new Tiger Gleyber Torres for maybe the worst defensive second baseman in baseball last year. So they were going to have to make this decision at some point. He was going to move off to second base at some point. Whether this hastens it, I'm not sure. But they've got Yordan Alvarez under contract through 2028, and he's going to be their DH. Altuve's under contract through 2029. The logical thing would be to just DH Altuve later in his career, but they may not have that luxury because they have Alvarez. So he's going to have to move somewhere. I think left field is probably the most suitable place for him. To me, it doesn't make sense to me. It does make sense. Sure, if they get him back and it happens, but for the longer term trajectory of this, let's say Bregman takes the 6-year deal. This is not something that if this happens and they move Jose Altuve to left field, they can't just say, all right, we'll do it for a season and then switch it back next year. They've got Isaac Paredes for 3 more years. They've got Christian Walker for 3 more years. They've got, like I said, Alvarez through 2028. They'll have Bregman through whatever the length of that contract is. So it'd be a pretty long-term thing. And I'm not sure that that's what they want to do. And again, it's why I keep characterizing this as a long shot. I think it could happen. And I think if Jim Crane wants it to happen, it will happen. But it just seems like it's a lot to do for, it just doesn't feel right. And even though this is the same franchise where they watched Craig Biggio move to the outfield for Jeff Kent back in the 2000s, like there's parallels there. But, I would, if I were them, I just flip Isaac Paredes. Like, see if someone would take Isaac Paredes. Don't the Tigers need a third baseman?
Tigers do need a third baseman.
And wasn't Isaac Paredes once a Tiger?
Yeah, not great for that ballpark, but yeah.
No, it's great in that ballpark. There's no good player for that ballpark.
All right, hey, last thing, and then we'll let you get back to work. We all know about Bregman as a player, but what can you tell us about Bregman as a person? Obviously, you've covered him for quite some time. From what I've seen, he's married. He's got a young son. He's got another kid on the way. He's been in Houston for his entire career. It seems like, from what I can tell, his family's really connected to the Houston community. Like, is that a place where this guy is comfortable? And I guess kind of what impact is maybe that play on his free agency at this point in the process where we're getting real close to spring training?
I say this and I don't want, if Astros fans are listening, like I don't want this taken the wrong way. Like he's not like Jose Altuve, where Jose Altuve looked at Scott Boras and said, I'm not playing anywhere else. Like, this is my home. This is where I want to be. Like, I don't want to go anywhere else. That said, he likes it here. He likes Houston. He likes his teammates. They've done a lot of winning here. He's comfortable. His wife, Reagan, is from, I don't know if she's from Houston specifically, but she's from around here. Obviously, Knox, his son, was born here, but it also should be noted that they don't live here in the offseason. They live in Arizona, and he trains in Arizona in the offseason. So it's not one of these things like Ryan Presley had far more like Houston, like family pulling ties here. Like Ryan Presley's wife's from Houston. He's from Dallas, so he's a Texan. Both of his kids were born in Houston. Like he wanted to remain in Houston, all things being equal. Bregman's not really like that. I think I'm not sure that Houston itself and staying in Houston is like top of mind for him. But I think it certainly is a factor, but I don't think it's one of those overriding things that's going to be like the thing that pushes it over the edge. I think this is solely a contract, money, years. And also another thing, and I wrote about this right when the Astros season ended. Bregman is he's very baseball savvy as far as like looking long term. He doesn't want to be a part of a rebuild. He doesn't want to go to a place where they're going to tear it down 2 years into his contract. You look at the Astros and they just traded their best player for no other reason than they can't pay him. They've got Framber Valdez coming up to free agency this coming winter and they're not going to pay him. Jose Altuve is getting older and we're talking about him moving off of positions. You look at kind of the step back they took last year, you can kind of see the window kind of starting to close. And I wonder if he looks at that and he looks at, they just traded Presley. He looks at that and he wonders, like, does he want to be he's seen this franchise at its best. Does he want to be around, if there's a real possibility in 2 years, if they have to tear this thing down, if they have to start trading assets, if they have to have a rebuild, because they got a great prospect in Cam Smith in the Tucker deal, but like this farm system is still not good. The fact, and I said this on our podcast today, the fact that they're even talking about moving Jose Altuve to left field, like, what does that say about their outfield depth in the minor leagues? Like, they don't like it. Like, they don't like what they have in the minor leagues, and that's not a quick fix. So there's a lot of layers to it, but I think at the end of the day, I think if Jim Crane wants it done and if they can get to the finish line, then I think it has a good possibility of happening.
So much good stuff in these 15 minutes. Everyone, this has been Chandler Rome, Astros beat writer for The Athletic. Chandler, thanks for joining the Days of Roar podcast to share insight into Alex Bregman and the Houston Astros. We greatly appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Chandler.
Yeah, no problem.
So, Ed, what do you think?
I think the Tigers will have to overpay to get Bregman to come to Detroit, especially if that 6-year, $156 million offer from the Astros is on the table like Chandler Rome says it is. I mean, there are a lot of factors to consider here. Like, family is one, no state income tax in Texas is two, playing your entire career with one team. Like, there's some legacy with that I think is pretty cool. And while I understand Alex Bregman is going to want the most money possible, like if there isn't a significantly better deal out there, you can always fall back on legacy. So that's 3. I think ballpark is 4 as well. If you want to run up your numbers, like Houston is a place to play. Boston is a place to play. Detroit, not a place to play if you want to hit home runs. Maybe doubles, sure. But at the same time, you can hit a lot of doubles off that wall in Fenway Park and, they're in Houston. So I don't know. Like, I think there are some reasons, and I just listed them, like why the Tigers will have to overpay if they want to sign Bregman. And in that case, you step back and you say, okay, if you're the Tigers, what kind of offer gets it done? Right now, he has 6 years, $156 million from the Astros. That's $26 million per season. For the Tigers, maybe it's 6 years, $180 million, which is an additional $24 million compared to the Astros offer on a total value. It's $30 million per season as opposed to the Astros offer at $26 million per season. Or maybe it's 7 years, $182 million from the Tigers, which is an additional year and an additional $26 million compared to the Astros offer. Still, it's the same $26 million per season when you compare it to the Astros offer, but it's another year tacked on, a 7-year deal as opposed to a 6-year deal. And then you take another step back and you say, do we see the Tigers paying 6 years, $180 million for Alex Bregman? How about 7 years, $182 million? Like, personally, I think both of those offers would beat the Astros offer, but will the Tigers actually offer 6 years, 7 years for Alex Bregman? Or do the Tigers not want to go beyond 5 years? Because if the Tigers don't go beyond 5 years, I don't think they're going to sign Alex Bregman. He already has a 6-year offer on the table that he can take whenever he wants. So again, this is what I said last week about following the market or leading the market. The Tigers have chosen to follow the Alex Bregman market. And now the seemingly dead market is alive with the reemergence of the Astros. This is exactly what happens when you follow the market. And if you're the Tigers, you have to be ready to live without Bregman, because that is a very real possibility now that the Astros are back in the mix.
Yeah, I don't think I could have said it any better. And if the answer was that they wanted to, lead the market, the deal would be done. So it should be an interesting week, but I just find it all hard to believe that the Detroit Tigers are signing Alex Bregman at this point. All right, question 2, the big 2. Jack Flaherty wants to return to the Detroit Tigers. Should the Detroit Tigers sign him? Thoughts?
We talk about Alex Bregman being unsigned with 22 days until position players report to spring training. Right-hander Jack Flaherty remains unsigned with 17 days until pitchers and catchers report to spring training. He went on the Follow Territory show to talk about his free agent market. And to be honest, it was pretty sad and a little bit depressing to hear him talk about how there isn't a market for him that he was expecting. He was looking for like 5 years, $100 million when the offseason got underway. He wanted to sign early, but no one's giving him 5 years, $100 million, and it's getting very late in the process. On Follow Territory, Flaherty talked about how he wanted to stay in Detroit and loved playing for the Tigers. He also mentioned that he has been talking to the Tigers and other teams. He said, quote, "It would be fun to go back there," end quote. Now, let's not forget, Flaherty also said he wanted to return to the Los Angeles Dodgers after starting Game 1 and Game 5 of the World Series. And that was clearly his number one team in free agency, but the Dodgers have moved on. And just like that, Flaherty is talking about the Tigers again. I would love to see Flaherty with the Tigers in 2025, but I don't know that there is a contract structure that works for both sides, because the Tigers aren't going to give Flaherty a 5-year contract. And I would bet that the Tigers aren't going to give Flaherty a 3-year contract with opt-outs because it's too risky. Remember, Flaherty had 2 injections to relieve pain in his lower back. The lower back injury is the reason why the Yankees nixed a trade for Flaherty at the trade deadline. So if the back injury becomes a real problem and Flaherty has the opt-outs, well, then he's just going to be an injured pitcher opting into his contract. And if he shoves again, he's going to opt out. So the best case scenario there is Flaherty dominates and leaves. The worst case scenario, Flaherty gets hurt and stays. That's why I'm not rolling the dice that there's some type of an agreement on a short-term contract with opt-outs, not with the injury history with the shoulder and the back. The Tigers are obviously going to be wary of that. So if the Tigers aren't going to do 5 years, and if the Tigers probably won't do 3 years with opt-out clauses, then what's the deal that makes sense for both sides? Certainly, Flaherty won't be forced to take another 1-year contract, I would assume. Tigers signed him to a 1-year, $14 million contract last offseason. Then Flaherty made the adjustments with his pitch mix and the way his body moves. That led to success on the mound. There's no way he signs another 1-year prove-it deal. I wouldn't think so, because he already proved it with a 3.17 ERA in 28 starts last season. Though his production did get worse after the trade from the Tigers to the Dodgers. Remember, for the Tigers, Flaherty had a 2.95 ERA with a 32% strikeout rate in 18 starts. For the Dodgers, Flaherty had a 3.58 ERA and a 26.1% strikeout rate in 10 starts. As for the fit, like the Tigers are a perfect fit because the Tigers would benefit from another frontline starter. Right now, it's Tarik Skubal, Reese Olson, Alex Cobb, and Jackson Jobe with the fifth spot up for grabs between Keider Montero, Casey Mize, Kenta Maeda, Brant Herter, Matt Manning. Imagine if it was Skubal, Flaherty, Olson, Cobb, Jobe. That's exactly what the Tigers need to stay competitive in games. They're not going to make a big splash and add a massive addition to the offense. So I like the fit, but I'm just not sure if there's a contract structure that works for both sides, especially considering Flaherty's health issues with his lower back as recently as last season. So I don't see a reunion with the Tigers, but I do think it's maybe an opportunity for Scott Harris, the president of baseball operations, to get creative with the free agent contract for once, because he hasn't done that yet. It's been 1-year deals, 2-year deals, team options. That's all he's done since taking over as the Pobo of the Tigers. So maybe Scott Harris can bring some creativity to the table and get something done with Jack Flaherty. I think the fit's great. I just don't know if the two sides will ever be able to agree on a contract that, both sides want.
Let me bring some facts to the table about the situation. The Tigers have stopped at this point in time, assuming they're not signing Alex Bregman, and one of the biggest reasons has to do with both length and total value of the contract. So they've got a stopping point regarding spending money. So they also have given us a lot of lip service about adding relievers. And in the meantime, this week, Ryan Presley, Paul Sewald, and Kirby Yates all signed, not for huge amounts of money, all have 1 year left. So the obligation to them is, for one season, money not spent. So why on earth, when they have 5 other potential starting pitching options, are you going to sign a starting pitcher, even though he has history with you, positive history, that's going to cost you $20 million plus? And remember, Severino signed for $23 million. Okay. Why are you signing a starting pitcher for $20 to $23 million that will take multiple years when you've had opportunities to spend money, less money, to improve your team, or to spend money on Alex Bregman? What makes you think they're going to spend money on a starting pitcher when they have 5 other starting pitcher choices aside from Jack Flaherty?
I don't think they will. I'm just saying, you got to consider the fact, who do you want taking the ball? Keider Montero or Jack Flaherty? Because that's really what you're talking about right now. It is Tarik Skubal, Reese Olson, Alex Cobb, Jackson Jobe, and that fifth spot is up for grabs, probably led by Keider Montero coming into spring training. I feel a whole lot different about the rotation and the team if you have Skubal, Flaherty, Olson, Cobb, Jobe. That's a huge difference, man, especially if you're not going to add to the offense, especially if you're not going to go out and get Bregman. You got to give yourself a chance to win some games. And the Tigers did a great job of that last year. And the rotation was stellar. The bullpen was stellar. I don't know if that pitching staff is going to be able to do what it did, especially without a guy like Jack Flaherty as the number 2 right behind Tarik Skubal. It's going to be a lot to ask for somebody like a Keider Montero to step up and really deliver some big innings. Now, yes, the health is a concern. Totally get it. But if you're not going to upgrade the offense, your pitching staff better be lights out. And I don't think they can get a whole lot better than they were last year. That's my big concern.
I'm not arguing that he would help the team. I'm just arguing in the way they manage their roster and their payroll. It's just not happening. The Tigers do not like to spend money. Why? You'll have to ask Chris Ilitch that question, because as a percentage of revenues, it's under 40%. So they're one of the lowest spending baseball teams in professional baseball as a percentage of their revenues. And, I think we need the owner to explain why. So this is not a Pobo question. It's not a question for the manager. It's a question for the owner. This is an owner question.
To be fair, you really would like to see Chris Ilitch step up and get involved in Alex Bregman negotiations, wouldn't you? I mean, that's again, what gets the deal done? What gets the deal done is a phone call from Chris Ilitch saying, get the deal done. What gets the deal done is dialogue between Chris Ilitch and Scott Boras, who's Alex Bregman's agent. That hasn't happened. So get on the phone, have a conversation, be involved in what's going on and give it the green light. Give it the green light. If Scott Harris is worried that taking a big swing on Alex Bregman and maybe it doesn't turn out in a few years from now, maybe it costs him his job. Like if that's the concern, is that he's going to end up with a bad Javi Baez type contract, which, let's be honest, Alex Bregman, Javi Baez, two completely different players with completely different skill sets. And I don't think Alex Bregman is going to age like Javi Baez. But either way, like if that's what Scott Harris is worried about, then Chris Ilitch needs to pick up the phone and make the call. And then Chris Ilitch has to take that upon himself. That's how I feel when you look at this situation. Like if you really want to win, if you really want to get to the World Series, if you really want to win it all, if you really want to fill those seats behind home plate, make the phone call. Make the call, have a conversation, and make it happen and get it done. Because if there's one person who can get it done, it's Chris Ilitch. I'll tell you that.
I've obviously been highly critical of many things about Hobo Scott Harris. I've also thrown a bouquet a few times about a lot of things he does well. But at the same time, here's the deal. If you think that Scott Harris does not want Alex Bregman on his baseball team, you guys don't really understand how competitive Scott Harris is. If Chris Ilitch was willing to pay the money, Scott Harris would pick him up at the airport, baby. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with Jackson Jobe in 60.
I'd like to welcome Detroit Tigers starting pitcher Jackson Jobe to the Days of Roar podcast. Jackson is the #1 prospect in the Tigers organization and a consensus top 5 prospect in baseball. He made his MLB debut at the end of the 2024 season and is projected to be in the opening day starting rotation in the 2025 season. Jackson, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the question I've been waiting all offseason to ask you. I remember a while back you talked about your $6.9 million signing bonus and how your dad made sure you saved your money. No big purchases, he said. All good things. Those are smart choices for sure. But you also mentioned that when you made your MLB debut, you were going to buy yourself a new car as a gift to yourself. Did you, I mean, obviously you made your MLB debut, so did you buy yourself the car or not yet?
Yeah, I honestly did. I forgot that I mentioned that before, but yeah, I went and bought something about a month ago, got here. So little gift to myself. But yeah, my dad's super hard on me about making sure I save everything, which is obviously smart. So try to limit the big purchases for now.
Yeah, well, that's a good dad looking out for you, but let the people know, man, like what car did you drive before? I think it might have been a truck, if I'm not mistaken. And then what car did you buy and why did you pick the car that you ended up getting?
I drove a F-150 in high school. Then my parents got me. And then, I made my debut, obviously, came back. Me and my dad went car shopping a little bit. I ended up getting, it's called a Porsche Cayenne GTS. So it's kind of like a crossover SUV, but I went and looked at some smaller cars. I just can't really fit very well in like the smaller, like the littler cars. And like, I can't fit stuff in it. Like when I go to spring training, I'm putting like 4 boxes of clothes and stuff in there and shipping it all out just to make it easy. So definitely more of a practical car, but can still have some fun in it. So that's what we went with.
Yeah, you can have a lot of fun in that one. But yeah, you're like 6'2" or something like that. I'm 6'3". Mark over here is pretty tall as well. So, you know, I totally understand that. Trying to squeeze into a small car, it's not the best, especially coming from a truck too. I mean, being a truck guy and then having to make a transition to a smaller car, it probably doesn't work. But all right, so let's dig into your 2024 season. You started the year in Double-A Erie and you ended the season pitching for the Tigers in the postseason. You also threw 102 miles an hour in spring training. You had a hamstring injury. You made a couple of starts in AAA Toledo. When you reflect, you know, what stood out about your 2024 season? There were a lot of twists and turns along the way.
Yeah, overall, I think it was good. I mean, looking back at like the numbers, like it was really good versus how like I felt about it. Like, obviously, I want to be a guy that goes out there and punches the world, doesn't give up any runs, no hard contact, anything. And I did a really good job of that. The first half of the season, obviously, I had the hamstring injury. Every single time I go through the rehab, which hopefully I can stop, but I find myself with something new each year. So working on that. But rehab it's kind of hard. You're going through the mental stuff of trying not to compensate for the injury, and you take however many weeks off of throwing, so you're having to kind of reteach yourself how to throw. And I a lot of times find myself creating little bad habits which creep into the game. So I didn't really feel myself coming out of rehab. I was still throwing well, but I didn't feel the way I did coming into camp before the injury. Obviously, like, came into spring training was the best I'd ever felt or looked, in my life. And I came back and was a little rusty. Still put up good numbers, just wasn't as sharp as I was coming into camp. That's something me and obviously we talk about Alex, my pitching coach here, I've really tried to work on. Like, it's tough. Like, being somewhat newer to pitching, I'm still figuring out like my cues and, what to take out there with me to catch play. Overall, like, felt good about my year, but I feel like I'm definitely far away from reaching, my potential. There's still so many things I feel like I can work on and a few things I can do to make it better out on the field.
So before I jump into some questions about last season, I want to ask you, you just mentioned you felt better than you ever have and looked better than you ever had going into spring training last year. So understanding how the season progressed, how do you feel now? You're about to jump into spring training in another 10 days. How you feeling? How you looking now?
Yeah, I'd like to believe that I'm in a better spot right now than I was last year, just going off of my bullpens and everything. Obviously, I'm in a little different position now. I'm trying to go out there and make the team. Like, without a doubt, that's what my mind is set on. Last year, I was not in this position. So trying to be smart about my ramp up and making sure I'm prepared to throw however many 130, 140 innings, however many innings they want me to throw. I'm trying to slowly progress into that. But yeah, I feel great. I feel like I learned a ton from last offseason, and I've had a really good game plan for this offseason. It's coming together pretty well.
Before we start getting into pitch mix, I noticed that finally, starting in July of last year, they had always kind of limited your outings in number of pitches and innings. And I think the real growth for young pitchers comes when they start facing good lineups, the third time. And starting in July, you started throwing 5, got up to 6, and then in August, multiple times, you threw 7. So take us through how you navigated things differently because you were facing lineups a third and sometimes a fourth time. How'd that change for you?
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, I don't really feel like my mindset changed a ton. It's always, go after guys, attack hitters. But there is something to it. Like, you don't want to, first time through the lineup, you don't want to show, all 5 pitches or 4, however many you have to, the leadoff hitter. Or you kind of want to keep a few things in your back pocket if you can. So that's probably the biggest thing. And going back in the dugout, talking with your pitching coach and looking at the guys that are coming up and checking out what you threw to them the previous at bat and making sure you're just not getting repetitive. So it's just little things like that. I don't feel like it's a huge, having to change anything, like a huge change, just being mentally prepared, going in each at bat, facing each guy, like you said, for the third or fourth time, because they get more comfortable with senior stuff. So yeah, just being aware of how you attacked them previously and making sure you're mixing it up, keeping guys on their toes is probably the biggest one.
And then for you, obviously, you go through the minor leagues, you get to AAA, you make a couple starts, you get to the big leagues, and then you make your MLB debut. The day was September 25th, 2024. You make your debut, you come out of the bullpen for the 9th inning. What is it like when you have a whole stadium full of fans chanting your name, like, "We want Jobe," and then, you make the jog out and it's Jobe, Jobe, Jobe. What did that feel like?
Yeah, it was incredible. It was super cool. Definitely a lot of nerves, a lot of adrenaline running through my body, but tried to be as composed as I could. I tried to take it in as much as I could and also not make the moment, too big. Trust that I belong out there, and AJ and everyone made me feel really comfortable going in. Kind of had a bit of an idea when I was going to throw, which helps because I had, never really come out of the bullpen aside from that time in spring training, and that was a much more controlled environment. So yeah, it was cool. It was about as good as you could write it up with the fans and everything. And, heading into the postseason, the team was hot and there was just great vibes all around. And it was super special, super cool.
It was a small sample. I think it was 2 outings in the regular season, 2 outings in the postseason, but you were facing big league hitters, especially some of the best big league hitters in the postseason. What did you learn from that opportunity, even though it was coming out of the bullpen and it wasn't starting? And were you able to say, okay, here are some areas where I want to improve going into 2025 based on what I learned, even in a small sample, facing big league hitters?
Yeah, no, I think I really liked my mindset going out into it. Coming out of the bullpen, never had done that. Being in the big leagues, obviously never done that. Being in the postseason, never done that. There's a lot of new things for me, but I just try to keep it as simple as possible. Kind of take the mindset that I'm out there and, double A or whatever, facing guys. Like, I know that my stuff plays in the big leagues or else they wouldn't have brought me up in that position. And, even having Fett just not overcomplicate things. Like obviously we'd have the scouting report meetings that show, what stuff plays best to each guy. But then I remember him coming up to me, whatever it was, not even before the postseason, just telling me to go out there and trust my stuff. Like, don't overcomplicate it. And overall, like, I felt good about the way that I handled myself and the way that, I trusted my stuff out there. I would have liked to gone out there and punched every single guy. I obviously didn't do that, but it was a great experience, and it's going to make next year a whole lot easier. That's for sure. I think it was a really good experience for me to have my back pocket moving forward in big situations, knowing that I was out there in the postseason facing the best hitters in the world and had thrown, 3 or 4 innings in the big leagues leading up to that. So yeah, I think that whole experience is going to take me a long way, I think.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about your pitch arsenal. I think the evolution of your arsenal is almost underrated. People always like to discuss your high spin sweeper, the velo, but there's a lot more that's gone on than that. What I really am interested in is what has become my favorite pitch that you throw, and really an out pitch for you now is, tell us when you started throwing the changeup the way you throw it. Have you tweaked it at all? And where is it now compared to when you signed?
Yeah, so I started throwing this same changeup my senior year of high school. And when I was in high school, if you're a guy that throws hard in high school, you don't really need to throw a changeup. So it's kind of hard for me to work on that. Being a harder throw in high school and guys typically being late on the heater, you don't really need to mix in the changeup, but I tried to show it as much as I could. But yeah, I've had that same grip up until now, still throwing that. I think I realized how good of a pitch it was my first year of pro ball, where I still really didn't throw it as much as I did now, but the results of it were really good. And just getting more comfortable with that and understanding that, being able to mix it, especially to right-handed hitters, having the sweeper being my bread and butter when I got in, guys knowing that, and then having something that starts middle and dives the other way versus starting middle and diving glove side, I think really helped that pitch perform. And now guys have to be worried about the changeup as well. So yeah, now I got the movement and everything dialed in. Now I just got to do a little bit better job of executing it, especially big league hitters.
I love that you said something about throwing your change to right-hand hitters. And Evan and I have discussed this about you, but I've noticed in a few times, on Tiger Minor League Report, they'll do cut-ups of starts, everybody's starts, but specifically yours. And I've seen you do this multiple times, but I've seen you come inside with a fastball to right-hand hitters, and a lot of times you pair it with a change inside to right-hand hitters after. Very, very few right-hand pitchers do that, and you execute it so well. And it's such a difficult thing for a right-hand hitter to, stay on, especially when you execute it the way you do. So talk to me a little bit about that, because it's obviously part of your sequencing strategy, and it's pretty unusual.
Yeah, it's just kind of the concept of tunneling pitches, being able to stick a four-seam in on a righty and being able to read their swing. If they're kind of cheating to it and they get to it, whether they foul it off or whatever, they have to be ready for 98 inside, and they can't be ready for 98 inside and then a change of 85 that starts off the same tunnel. So it's a great concept. It's just a matter of executing it. It's the same thing for working the other side of the plate, being able to establish a heater down in a way that way they have to respect the slider off of it to get the punch. So yeah, it's just setting up hitters, being able to work both sides of the plate, and having pitches that move different ways is great. But if you don't know how to use it, then you're not going to get much out of it. So still learning, but yeah, it's definitely a very, very good sequence in my opinion.
Speaking of learning how to use pitches, how have you learned to use your slider? Big spin rate, lots of movement. It's a great weapon for you. And it was probably the most talked about weapon, when it comes to your arsenal coming out of the draft, but it has to be used correctly, right? How have you learned to use that slider over the years?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. When I was throwing the sweeper before the sweeper was called the sweeper. It was just the big slider. And that was like my pitch in high school, the high RPMs. Everyone loved it. Spin rate just came out. No one understood it, but it was cool. So everyone loved it. Then I got into pro ball, and my first year was really good. And then in 2023, it kind of slowly started to lose effectiveness. As far as when I say effectiveness, I mean the swing and miss factor. I wasn't getting as many swings and misses. I was getting more takes. And it seems like everyone in the baseball world kind of fell in love with the sweeper. So now you look at guys, and there's like 8 pitchers on each team that throw a sweeper. So guys are seeing sweepers left and right all over the place. So that pitch has definitely lost effectiveness as far as swing and miss goes. So last year it turned into more of a like get me over, get me to 2 strikes. And then I was using other stuff to punch tickets when I could, but kind of experimenting with something a little different this year, trying to add a little bit more depth to that, get a little bit more north and south to my arsenal because I had the carry forcing. So if I have something like with a little bit more depth, like a curveball, for example, then I think that might play a little better. My problem last year was putting guys away. I would get to 0-2, 1-2 super fast. I think like a 70% rate clip. And then I was, having just a tough time punching guys. So gonna experiment with something a little different this year, at least in spring training, and see how it goes. But yeah, the sweepers definitely taking over the baseball world. That's for sure.
So the changeup, the sweeper, and obviously I want to ask about the fastball too and the evolution of that pitch because you've always been able to hit upper 90s and beyond. But what are the keys for you to have a good fastball? I know you've worked really hard on that pitch from day one coming in with the Tigers, and maybe it's still a work in progress in some sense because that pitch has taken some damage at times. But when it's right, it's really good. What are the keys for you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is making sure I'm just staying through it. I'm getting the backspin and letting it have that like carry effect right up in the zone. Yeah, my ear took a lot of damage in 23, and then we moved me from the first base side of the rubber to the third base side, and for whatever reason, it helped me carry it a little better and added a little bit of deception. So I think it performed a lot better last year than it did year before. But yeah, the biggest thing is just making sure I'm staying behind it, getting that good backspin to miss bats.
Jackson, talk a little bit about, from a fastball standpoint, I think it's not unfair to say that fastball command is going to be a huge, huge thing for you this year. It sets up all the other pitches you throw. Obviously, major league hitters' pitch recognition and strike zone recognition is, at a level you've not faced in the minor leagues. So, how is that impacting your commitment to making sure you improve your fastball command?
No, it's a big deal. When I got the chance to speak to Garrett Cole in spring training, and the one thing he said to me, he was very adamant about, he was like, when you get to the league, guys are going to make you command all 4 quadrants of the zone. They're going to make you do it over and over again until you can prove to them that you can command your fastball. So I hear from a guy like that who's done it for however many years, one of the best pitchers in the game, probably going to be a Hall of Famer, most definitely. Shows you how important it is. And it's never going to be perfect. He's definitely still working on it, but yeah, if you can just understand your missed patterns and be able to locate different parts of the zone with that pitch, it's going to take you pretty far, is what it sounds like.
I remember AJ Hinch set that meeting up for you guys in spring training. Were you nervous going into that? Because I know you're a Tim Lincecum guy, but you're also a pretty big Garrett Cole fan.
I mean, yeah, a little bit, but I know he's just another baseball dude. So I just wanted to sit there and kind of let him talk and hear what he had to say. And yeah, it was really cool. It seemed like he loved it. Like he loves talking about the game, talking about pitching. So it was super cool.
Have you had conversations like that with other guys too? Like I know obviously your teammate Tarik Skubal just won the Cy Young Award. Have you guys had, those kind of talks, or maybe those are going to happen in spring training now that you guys are both settled in?
Yeah, I remember having a couple of conversations with him in spring training, specifically about the fastball command stuff. And you go and watch him, and he's got the 2-seam, the 4-seam, like he's one of the best. He commands the zone with his heater probably just as well as anyone, and it's 97 or 100. And then, he wins the AL Triple Crown, the Cy Young. So, yeah, another thing just goes to show you how important that is.
So Scott Harris, the Tigers president of baseball operations, said that you've been putting in a lot of work on specific adjustments this offseason. You kind of teased it a little bit, right? Trying to put guys away more. You get to 0-2, and then, okay, how can I put them away? Can you kind of walk us through and walk Tigers fans through maybe what exactly you're working on and what we should expect to see, when spring training comes around? Just in the sense of, hey, here's what I'm working on. Here's exactly what I'm trying to do. And this is what I want to bring into 2025.
Yeah, I would say it's pretty simple. I'm working on my 2-strike execution, working on putting guys away quicker. I don't know the exact number, but I mentioned it earlier. It's around 70%. In the minor leagues, I was getting to 0-2, 1-2, 70% of the time. And then there was a crazy percentage that X amount of my walks that started in 1-2 counts. And then a crazier percentage, my walks came from 2-2 counts. So, and my walk rate was much higher this past year than it was the year before. And to me, it was strictly 2-strike execution and the mindset behind it, not trying to gear up and throw it as hard as I can, but trying to execute. But I mentioned the sweeper, that the sweeper is not really a swing and miss pitch anymore, at least for most guys. It's more of a get me over, get me ahead in the count. And that's not really what I need. I need someone that's going to put guys away, someone that's going to play off my fastball. So that kind of comes with me experimenting with the curveball, having that north-south approach, coming up, playing off my four seam, and then still having the east and west with the cutter that's really a slider, and then having the changeup, and then as well as working on a two seam this offseason as well. So a couple new things to add to my arsenal that I think are going to be beneficial.
So it's been a lot of people like to discuss goals for the year, personal goals, rookie of the year stuff. What's your thought about that? And we also wanted to ask you, another candidate for rookie of the year is going to be Boston outfielder Roman Anthony. And I got a feeling you faced him a few times when you were in Erie. So let's touch on a couple of those things.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'd love to win rookie of the year. I think we get an extra pick from that as well.
Yep.
If I'm mistaken. Is that right?
Yep.
So yeah, I think it helps everyone if I win rookie of the year. It'd definitely be something really cool to accomplish for my career, but I think winning a World Series would be cooler. Doing both would be pretty cool as well. So yeah, and then Roman's obviously he's a stud. He was committed to Ole Miss as well. So I've heard a lot about him, and he's a hell of a hitter, that's for sure.
Jackson, just to kind of wrap up, I mean, obviously you have big goals, right? You'd love to win Rookie of the Year. You'd love to win a World Series. You've already tasted the champagne, so you know what that's like. And wanting to get back to there is important for sure. But also, man, like this is going to be your first full MLB season. You could throw 130, 140, 150 innings, maybe more with the playoffs. How are you preparing your body this time around? And what have you learned over the years about preparing your body for a season? And maybe what's different, knowing that this could be 130 plus innings for you.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different of a mindset. This is my first offseason where I haven't focused on gaining weight. Like I feel like I put my body physically in a pretty good spot to be able to take on, 130 innings, being able to throw hard, sustain velo throughout outings. Like I've done that. I think now it's just a little bit more the little stuff, like not letting a little hamstring injury creep in, like making sure I'm taking care of the little details with making sure I'm doing my shoulder care, all this stuff, and preparing my body, then not just getting under the bench press and trying to put on mass. So, focusing on the little things like mobility and hamstring work, definitely still hammering that, making sure my back's in a good place, just trying to check all the boxes and make sure nothing creeps in for this year. And then as well as like being smart with my ramp up, making sure I'm not getting going too fast, whereas times in the past I may have done that. This is going to be a different year. I'm expected to throw more innings than I ever have. So preparing myself for that and, not coming into camp trying to, make the team with my first bullpen, like just being smart about it and staying consistent with my routine and things like that.
And then now that you're a big leaguer, what do you think is the most important lesson that you learned in the minor leagues that will stick with you for the rest of your career? And maybe if there are other minor league pitchers out there, like what advice are you giving them as they try to get to the big leagues like you did?
I mean, it's pretty cliche, but I would just say trust the process. I think the minor leagues are very mentally tough. There's times where you think you should be in a different spot than you are, and you're going through rehab and you want to get out quicker than you are. And there's just a lot of mental battles that you have to go through. But in the end, like I'm extremely thankful for all the ups and downs that I went through, even 2022 in low A, putting up like a 5 ERA through 3 months and, like hearing all about that. And it prepares you for being on the biggest stage, possible. So being able to go through that, having all those experiences and surrounding yourself with good people, I think is another big one, finding people that you can trust in the organization, people that you can vent to. It definitely gets lonely down there sometimes, but you can't beat yourself too much about it. Everything is going to help you progress and grow and mature.
That's good stuff, Jackson. All right, that's all we have for you. Thank you for joining the Days of Roar podcast. And enjoy driving that new car because you definitely deserve it, man. Congrats on last season. Best of luck the rest of the offseason, and we'll see you soon in spring training.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Everyone, that was Jackson Jobe, top prospect for the Detroit Tigers. We have more to discuss in this week's episode, but first, let's take a break.
All right, we're back. Last night at a ceremony for Major League Baseball award winners, Tarik Skubal accepted his 2024 American League Cy Young Award, and then he had this to say about Alex Bregman.
Yeah, Tarik Skubal, he went on the Follow Territory show, which was streaming the award ceremony after accepting his Cy Young Award, and he was asked about the potential of Alex Bregman joining the Tigers. Skubal said, quote, "He would look really good. end quote. And to me, Tarik Skubal saying that means everything. It was subtle. It wasn't a whole lot. You could tell he wasn't going to say too much about Bregman, maybe because he didn't want to disrespect his current teammates. But Skubal indicated he endorses Alex Bregman to Detroit. This isn't just any player saying this. This is the ace of your starting rotation, the active face of your franchise. This is the guy you're trying to sign to a long-term contract extension who already turned you down once. This is the guy who becomes a free agent after the 2026 season, making 2025 and 2026 as the window to win a World Series with him on the roster. This is Tarik Skubal, and Tarik Skubal wants Alex Bregman. Also, Tarik Skubal is represented by Scott Boras, the same agent that represents Alex Bregman. I said this last week on the podcast, but I bet Skubal's watching how all this plays out. And I wonder if what happens could factor into his decision to stick around in the long term. It certainly would help the Tigers to win, acquiring Bregman, which is how the Tigers are trying to convince Skubal to sign an extension. Like, if you want to make Skubal fall in love with winning in Detroit, then you have to win. Alex Bregman moves that needle forward. He also proves you're a championship caliber organization because he is a championship caliber player. So I'm glad Tarik Skubal said what he said about Alex Bregman looking really good in the Old English D. He also advocated for re-signing Jack Flaherty. Could you imagine if the Tigers signed Bregman and Flaherty? For Bregman and Flaherty, like, it's late in the offseason. Their markets aren't as healthy as we expected, and they both have interest in playing for the Tigers. So Alex Cobb, Gleyber Torres, Alex Bregman, Jack Flaherty, that's an easy A grade for the offseason. And it becomes an A plus if you get Kenley Jansen, Kyle Finnegan, or David Robertson to a one-year contract to be the closer. But Scott Harris and Chris Ilitch would have to step out of the comfort zone to make Bregman and Flaherty happen. Keep in mind, Scott Harris has not signed a position player to a multi-year contract since he was hired by the Tigers in September 2022. And the longest contract he gave to a pitcher was 2 years to Kenta Maeda. I doubt it happens, but man, oh man, wouldn't it be great? Bregman and Flaherty? We'll take just Bregman, but that is an A offseason if you go get Bregman and Flaherty. And then if you add a guy like Kenley Jansen, that's an A plus of an offseason. You're 3 moves away from having an A plus of an offseason, convincing a guy like Tarik Skubal that you're going to win in the long term here in Detroit, that you're serious now, that you're serious for the long term. I like that Tarik Skubal came out and said it, don't you? Don't you like that he said, hey, Alex Bregman would look great in the Old English D? I think that means something. You have your star player, your ace, your guy saying Alex Bregman would look pretty damn good in Detroit. I think that means something, Mark.
Well, it really means 2 things. The first scenario means that secretly Christopher Ilitch has sold the team to Steve Ballmer. I don't think that happened. The second one means that maybe a bunch of edibles I ate just kicked in during the podcast, because that would be the only other reason why that possibly could happen. If they're going to sign Bregman and Flaherty, obviously edibles have kicked in because that has about the same level of possibility of happening as edibles kicking in on this podcast. And signing Kenley Jansen, it would be, I was probably far overdosed on edibles.
But Mark, your ace says he wants it. Your ace wants Alex Bregman and Jack Flaherty.
My ace, I would find it difficult to believe that my ace wanted anything else. He wants to win. Okay. I'm more worried about if they sign Alex Bregman, it uses up all of Tarik Skubal's money and he's not signing here even more than 100%, which is the percentage I've put on the likelihood of Tarik Skubal not signing here. All right. Enough of this craziness. Okay. Because this is just crazy. We sound like 2 11-year-olds in a basement.
I'm just saying that okay, then you're saying Tarik Skubal sounds crazy because that's what he wants. That's my point. I'm not saying that it's going to happen. I'm saying, could you imagine, first and foremost, and obviously we can all imagine, but it's not going to happen. But at the same time, I just think it matters that you're ace. Tarik Skubal, your all-star, your Cy Young winner is coming out and saying, hey, go out and get Alex Bregman. Go out and get Jack Flaherty. What kind of a message is he sending to the front office and to ownership? And what is ownership going to come back with? I think that is what matters, because when ownership doesn't come back with Alex Bregman and ownership doesn't come back with Jack Flaherty, well, whether that's ownership or front office or a combination of both, Is your ace going to be disappointed? Maybe a little bit, yeah. And that's why I think it matters that he came out and said, yeah, Alex Bregman, he looked great in the Old English D. And yeah, Jack Flaherty, I've been in contact with him. And I've seen some rumors. It'd be nice to get him to re-sign with the Tigers. Like, Tarik Skubal's saying that. I think it matters, and I think we should talk about it.
All I got to say to you, Evan Petzold, is, and I have to say this quietly because Sandy Gorach is in the other room after 40 years of being married to me, and that deserves some type of medal. But the chances of the scenario that you just described to me happening are about the same as the scenario of Kate Hudson calling and offering to meet me in Maui.
Mark, I'm not talking about a scenario, Mark. I'm talking about that's what your ace wants. I'm not saying that, like, yes, it is a scenario that I provided, but at the same time, like, shouldn't the Tigers listen to their ace?
Yes, but they're
That's
not
all I'm
going
saying.
to. All right, I'm getting us out of here. Please like, rate, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and especially YouTube. You can always find us wherever any Evan Petzold article appears in the Free Press. There's lots of other podcasts for the Free Press to listen to there also. I'd like to thank our editor, Nicole Avery Nichols, our producer, the magic man, Robin Chan. Boys, he got his work cut out for him this week. Love to my amazing grandsons and to the spectacular, soon-to-be mommy, Savannah Petzold. And until next week, peace.